It's being called the biggest overhaul of financial rules since the Great Depression. The Obama administration will unveil its regulatory reform package tomorrow. So in the meantime, let's head over to Washington and our Bloomberg's Hans Nichols with more. And Hans, Al Hunt will sit down with the president this afternoon. What can we expect to hear in that interview?
The president will start to lay down the markers on where this legislation is going and what he wants. But one thing to consider on this is that the White House, in formulating this regulatory reform, hasn't really been consulting with Congress. Now, there hasn't been the ping-pong match between the two where they're hitting proposals back and forth. Now, Congress has held hearings, but they haven't really been involved in the details like they have with some of the other proposals that are part of the president's agenda. That, for example, the Speaker hasn't designated a lieutenant on this. It's unclear who will actually seize this bill once it goes to the House and the Senate, for that matter, and really take control of it. Now, one thing about legislative orphans is that they either get adopted, which could happen with this, or they just kind of quietly go away. It's unclear what's going to happen with regulatory reform.
Well, given all that, Congress also has a lot of other things on its plate, health care for one. How likely is it that this regulatory reform will become a top issue?
Well, Scarlett, a lot of the impetus for this, of course, was the financial crisis. And as the financial crisis, as the economy is on the mend and the unemployment numbers aren't real encouraging, there's some signs that and the administration talks about this, some stabilization in credit markets. That will take some of the impetus away. Also remember, very busy calendar for Congress for the rest of this year. They've got to get health care reform done. That's a priority of the president's. Then there's energy legislation. And then don't forget about all those spending bills that need to get done by the end of the fiscal year. On top of that, there's a larger issue of how you close down Guantanamo. There's a deadline on that in January of next year. So it's very easy to see how all this could get pushed and punted towards the next legislative session. That brings us into to an election year and the politics of a midterm election. So unclear whether or not the Congress will act on this session.
Now, very quickly, Hans, how intense do we expect the lobbying on something like this to be?
Oh, as intense as you can imagine. All the financial services are very well represented on Capitol Hill. There haven't been that many open doors in the White House on this. They all have very good contacts on all the various different committees of jurisdictions. Expect to see a lot of white shoe lobbyists pounding the marble down there, talking to members of Congress, explaining their side of this. That's one other case, one other reason why this might be elongated. Scarlett?
Okay, Bloomberg's Hans Nichols from our Washington bureau.